Hi guys, welcome back to my channel Limelight Aish. So in this episode of the Sports Glory podcast, we have got Sanika Devakar with us, who has played table tennis for almost a decade for the national side. She got into yoga and psychological training early in her table tennis career, and then that tuned her to become a sports and exercise psychologist. This is a must-listen podcast for anyone related to the sports and fitness industry. We discussed a lot about the mental aspect of an athlete and so many questions related with the psychological aspect of sports. Make sure to check out this whole episode. Let's go. Oh wait, if you're getting an episode, I want to say that please subscribe and click on the bell icon down below so that you don't miss any of the videos that are coming up. So let's go to today's episode. Long story short, how did you get started with table tennis?
Again, a very short answer is I've always been a very hyperactive and a very like a kid who has a lot of energy. So my parents are like, please don't bug us with your energy. We're busy throughout the day. Please do something else. So they put me for like a summer camp in my school, and the only sport that was available there was table tennis.
Okay.
So I picked it up there. And then I sort of changed coaches because the coach that I was playing under thought that maybe I could seriously and play professionally. So then I switched coaches, and then I was a part of an academy who the coach was like, oh, we had like 7, 8 international players and I said national, and that's when my journey started as a professional player.
Okay. So I read about a story online and I came to know you took yoga training very early on in your life. So how has that changed you as a person, or how has it influenced your game?
I think I was very, very young when I started doing yoga because, again, that was something which my coach recommended in terms of balance, in terms of posture, and in terms of just basic breathing exercises and things like that. Because table tennis is it's a very quick sport. It's a very agile sport.
Mhm.
You really have to be, really, really fit to be able to play that
Yeah.
sport. So I was doing physical fitness as well as yoga, and I was very young, so I was also growing up, and I really enjoyed doing that, and I still did enjoy doing that. So I think it really helped me sort of calm my mind down before a match or so with basic breathing exercises and
Okay.
stretchings and things like that. And overall, it just helped me, to stay fit. And yeah, I think, and now I think it's like a lifestyle choice that I've made where I sort of spend some time I try to spend some time. I mean,
Okay.
if I'm very honest,
Yeah.
I try to spend some time doing it.
So when you told about it, I cannot believe many people told me to even try yoga, but then I guess I don't have so much of patience to try that out. I don't know why. I've been trying it, but then I can't.
Yeah, I know it's slow initially, like
Okay.
it takes a lot of time for you to see the results or for you to start liking it.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I had a yoga trainer who's like a very senior yoga trainer. So she, didn't sort of just lead with the basic asana. So she tried to make it fun and like creative for me. So I think
Okay.
that was my hook, which sort of anchored me.
Okay. Because I know you started pretty early, and then even at the age of 18, 19, no, I can't do it. That's why I wanted to ask you about it.
Yeah.
So how has been your journey playing for the national side for almost a decade now?
Yeah, I think the journey was again like any other sport player. There was a lot of ups and downs and lulls and patches where I was playing good. There were patches where wasn't playing good. I think
Okay.
that's just a part and parcel of an athlete's life, right? Not every match will you win, and not every match do you lose. So I think I started very, very early when I was very young. So I was just playing because I had fun.
Okay.
And this was something which I really, really enjoyed doing. And I think that is why I could play for about 10 years now. So I think, it just made me really happy. I just had fun when I played. And I was fortunate to be a part of an academy who had a lot of senior players. So, it was a very natural moment for me when I looked up
Okay.
to them, having India kids and things like that. I think that really kept me going. And again, my coach has been supportive till date in terms of whatever decisions I've taken. So I was really fortunate to have that. Also, having been a part of an academy who has a lot of support staff. So my coach didn't just pay attention to my table tennis performance, but in general. So she introduced us to like a yoga trainer. We had a different strength and conditioning coach. We had a physiotherapist if at all we were, there was say minor injuries and things like that. We also had a sports psychologist. So she looked at performance from a I would say from a holistic
Okay.
perspective and a 360-degree view. So I think that really really helped not just me but all the players of my academy, and that's why probably it's one of the most successful academies in our country,
Okay.
and it has produced a lot of international players and national level players. And it has groomed me in a way, and I'm a lot of me is because my early grooming as an athlete, and having trained under a female coach. I think I have to give back to the sport and just to my coach and my academy.
Okay. That was great to hear. So, like, how has been your family support in your journey?
Actually, I am a part of a family who's a sport loving family.
Okay.
So my father was used to play cricket. My younger brother plays cricket. My grandfather used to play table tennis. My uncle is like a karate black belt. So I come from a family who was, I like grown up in sports. So seeing cricket, seeing the Australian team, seeing Federer's matches, or seeing Agassi's matches was how I spent my childhood. So
Okay.
I've always been so the ins and outs. The dinner conversations are always about sport. The conversations just if you meet like a get together in your family, you would always discuss some sport. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't news for my parents that I wanted to take up sport at a professional level, and they were very very supportive. And also, more than my family, I think even my school was very supportive because
Okay.
I didn't attend school a lot because when I was professional, I was playing about 8 9 hours
Mm-hmm.
a day, so I couldn't have time to sort of go to school and do the regular stuff that kids of my age were doing.
Yep.
So I think I was really really fortunate to have a support system in place so that I didn't need to put my head into how do I get things done and how do I operationalize
Mm-hmm.
rather things. Yeah.
I get it. So, like, I guess you were in your seventh standard when you actually took up your first ever sports psychology session.
Yes, I think in my seventh grade.
Yep.
Yes.
So, like, did that bring any change after you had your first session? Like, did your mindset about something changed?
There was a lot of change
Okay.
actually, and again, it was my coach who suggested that
Mm-hmm.
you should sort of talk to a mental trainer. And I was, if I remember clearly, I had become just a state champion, and I was practicing for my national championships,
Okay.
and it was going to be my first ever national championship appearance. And it was my, I think it was my first year of playing active, like competitive tournaments also. So my miss was like, hey, if the sport is just not physical, you are going to have
Mm-hmm.
some mental training help, and I think you should consult with this doctor. And my parents were also game for it because like I mean again I really think I'm lucky because then my parents didn't question ki, why do you need a mental trainer and this and that, and you're young, and I didn't have to face any of that,
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, touch wood. So I started taking sessions, and it just didn't help me like a player, but I think it changed me as a person as well
Okay.
because at that age I was growing emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
and I was maturing as I was playing, right? So it definitely did help me build a consistency in my performance and enhance my performance,
Mm-hmm.
but it also helped me in terms of being aware of my own emotions
Mm-hmm.
outside of my sport. And I remember when I came home from I think my first or second session, I told my mom, if I don't make it as a player and if I don't become like a professional player, I mean, this is something that I would want to do
Okay.
for a living
Okay.
after my sports. I think that seed of sports psychology was sown in, when I was taking sessions as an athlete.
That's interesting. So, like, when did you actually realize that you want to shift your career from like TD player and then get into sports psychology?
Actually, I've always loved studying, and I really enjoy reading and
Okay.
studying and analyzing and things like that. And I'm very very inquisitive. I'm having played the sport. I mean, I have that insight as to what really happens when you're in an arena,
Yep.
or what does all these words like anxiety and confidence and things like that mean. And my biggest question to my coach always as a young player was, this, why do I win sometimes and why do I lose sometimes? Why don't I consistently win or why don't I consistently lose? So I was very, very inquisitive as to
Okay.
why, I do what I do and why do I perform like the way I do and why do I suck sometimes, very honestly like that. And I always had that going in my mind. And, after having done sessions with my sports psychologist, I think that insight was, developing. And then I gave my 10th standard exam and I decided that I'll take up BA arts. Then I will be exposed to some levels of
Mm-hmm.
psychology and let me see how it goes. So I gave my 12th in my arts, and that is when I decided that no, I really want to take up psychology as my
Okay.
undergrad and then probably specialize in sports psychology. So I think I had it in my mind and I had it like, in my 5 year down the line plan, you can say that I
Okay.
really wanted to do sports psychology. So it was not like a revolution that happened neither to my parents, nor to
Mhm.
my coach, nor to my practice partners. I mean, everybody knew that if I would do something, it would be in sports psychology.
That was interesting, actually. So, like, let's get into some basic questions about sports psychology. So, like, what about, like,
Yeah.
first of all, I want to ask you, like, what is exactly sports psychology?
So basically, sports psychology is like a study of human
Mm-hmm.
behavior. When I say human behavior, it's a study of athlete behavior, and you try and help the athletes build mental training skills. The two goals of sports psychology to be very in the most simplistic terms is performance enhancement, performance consistency, and to ensure the overall well-being of an athlete.
Okay.
So you work with athletes, you work with coaches, you work with parents to ensure that there is performance growth and that athlete is in check of his emotions and thoughts. And those factors don't impede his or her performance.
Okay.
He uses all of these mental training skills like a springboard so that the performance is elevated or enhanced, or to some extent sometimes even the performance stays consistent. So there, your graph doesn't go up and
Mm-hmm.
down. So there's a lot of consistency which we can build in through mental training.
Okay. So, as you said about mental training, whenever I read about psychology, I find this word everywhere. Like, mental training is highlighted
Yeah.
everywhere. So, like, what exactly is mental training?
Actually, the scientific and the official word
Mm-hmm.
is psychological skills training,
Okay.
PST. I mean, you will read further
Yeah.
as you read your literature as well. What a PST is that there are a couple of interventions, there are a couple of techniques. Again, athletes may have heard it, the listeners of this podcast may have heard it, you may have heard it.
Mm-hmm.
So things like self-talk and confidence and imagery, visualization, goal setting, leadership skills, communication, team cohesion, and the list just goes on and on. So there are these skills and there are these concepts which can be worked upon. These are skills which are developable. These are skills which a sports psychologist can teach an athlete and work with him or her to develop.
Okay.
So things like self-confidence. It's not like an antibiotic pill, right? You just
Okay.
pop it in and okay, now I feel confident. It doesn't happen like that. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of insight building. It's a lot of self-awareness. So I think mental training is like an umbrella under which a lot of techniques and skills and applicable skills, I would say, which athletes learn
Okay.
depending on their need. So not every athlete will need everything, depending on how the athlete's personality is, depending on what the athlete's performance need is, depending on sport, on age, on gender. So there are a lot of factors that you have to consider when you plan a PST for a player, when you plan like a PST intervention for a player. So it's like an
Okay.
umbrella term, and there are many, many things, there are many, many layers to it.
Okay. So, like in India, when you talk about going to a psychology, it's still considered as a taboo. Like they think like you got some mental disorder problem, something like that. Even though like our generation
Yeah.
and we're getting influenced by the internet and stuff, like the older generation still think that going to psychology is like something wrong with our mental issues. So, like in that case, like there,
Yeah.
I have heard people saying therapist. So, like what's difference between a sports psychologist as well as like sports therapist?
I think in our country, unfortunately, there isn't like a set guideline or there isn't
Mhm.
like a governing body which we are. I mean, for psychology, we have, say, a BPS, which is a British Psychological Society, or we have like APA, right, which are like those governing bodies which lay out all of these operational terms and ethics and things like that. In our country, unfortunately, we don't have that. So we follow a lot of APA when it comes to psychologists and practicing and ethics and things like that. my understanding of the whole terminology is depending on your specialization
Okay.
and depending on your educational degree, right? So you may call yourself a psychologist, but there are certain requirements as to when can you call yourself a
Mhm.
psychologist. You can't call yourself a psychologist, for example, if you've just done like a 2 month online certification. You need to have like a
Mhm.
proper degree.
Yep.
You need to have like a proper educational exposure to call yourself a psychologist, a therapist, a counselor, like that, so on and so forth. So sports psychologists are basically people who have studied psychology at an undergrad and have majored into sports psychology. So it could be like a master of arts, a master of science. So you have had studied the subject, and sport, that's like a bare minimum. There are people who then further go on to pursue like a PhD in sports science or sports psychology
Okay.
specifically, or there are people who pursue like a doctor of psychology, which is a D Psych of sport and exercise psychology. After which, then you can call yourself a sports psychologist.
Okay. So, like, what kind of process do you actually follow when you're treating a rehabilitating athlete?
Process in terms of, do you want me to sort of walk you through what really
Haha.
happens in the
Yep.
first phase? Okay, fair enough. So what happens is typically either the athlete approaches you, either the parents of the athlete or the coach refers an athlete to like a sports psychologist. The sports psychologist to meet up with the parents.
I can't hear you.
Try and understand.
I guess there's an issue. I was
Can
not
you hear
able to
me?
hear. Yeah, yeah, now it's fine. Yep. Can you just go again?
Okay, can you hear
Yep.
me now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now it's fine.
Okay, just give me a minute because I can't hear you.
Okay. Is it fine now?
Okay, I think. Okay, is this
Yep.
better?
Yep, yep. It's fine now.
Okay. No, I was just saying that. So like a coach refers an athlete to a sports psychologist, a practitioner who's been practicing into the sports psychology field now. For unfortunately, we don't have a lot of sports psychologists in our country. So they get referred
Mhm.
to say counseling psychologists, the practicing general therapists, whatever taglines, whatever terms they call themselves. So there's a client history session which happens. You try and understand the athlete. You try and understand the athlete from parents perspective as to what the parents goals are, and what do they think about the whole process. A lot of times as a practitioner you have to educate the parent on certain things if
Mhm.
they have certain questions, because like you said, in our country approaching a psychologist is not the easiest
Yep.
things, and it's not really accessible most of the times, right? So there's a lot of say if there are a lot of questions from the parents side, that typically takes up your first session, where you try and understand the parents' questions, you try and
Okay.
answer them to your best capacity. Then you have to just go back and reflect whether the athlete's needs are something which fall in your area of expertise. If you feel that maybe you wouldn't be able to do
Mhm.
justice in providing the support that the athlete needs, or the whole ecosystem needs, then it's your you're bound by certain ethical duties where you have to refer the athlete. Because if you think that, okay, maybe this is something which is out of my purview and out of my
Okay.
expertise, out of my area of scope of work,
Mhm.
maybe you refer them to somebody else. So that also may happen. If that doesn't happen, then you review what the athlete needs, and depending on you sort of build the relationship with an athlete over the next couple of sessions, and then you do a needs analysis. You then
Mhm.
formulate an intervention plan which is customized depending on the needs of the athlete. So like I
Okay.
said, your mental training is not like a blanket. It's
Mhm.
not like a one shoe fits all. So you have to consider a lot of factors which the athlete gets to the table, and then considering all those factors, you have to ensure that your mental training intervention supports the athlete and helps him build him or her build the skills that the sport demands.
Okay. So I guess I kind of got an idea of how it works a bit.
I think I really can't hear you for some reason.
Oh,
Just
I
give
don't
me
know
like a
why.
minute.
Yup,
I'm
yup,
just going
yup.
to figure this out.
Mhm.
Is that all right?
Yup, yup.
Yeah, just give me a minute.
Mhm. Can you
Okay,
hear me now?
can we test once again? Yes, this is
Okay.
better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool then. So, like, I want to ask you, like, how often do you think an athlete should actually take up the help of a sports psychologist?
Again, there's not like a golden answer to this in terms of number of sessions that every athlete might need. Like I said, it hugely depends on the athlete's need. So the
Okay.
frequency of session is something which is discussed with the athlete, with the coach, because again, a coach also has a lot of insight as to in the athlete's performance and training and practice routines and things like that. So you have to consider all of these factors. In our country, there's also another challenge in terms of finances. So whether an athlete is able to financially afford the services, and of course, there are a lot of measures in place. There are a lot of sports psychologists and a lot of psychology practitioners in general who work on something called as a sliding scale.
Okay.
So there are a lot of measures in place for people and families who may not be able to afford a sports psychology service or something like that. So there are definitely all of these things are of these operational things are typically discussed in the first few sessions to sort of see how well can this relationship be built, and what is exactly the need of your athlete. So I think
Okay.
hugely this depends on the level of sport
Mm-hmm.
and then the demand from the sport actually. So
Okay.
there's not like one golden answer
Okay.
in terms of number of sessions and frequency.
Okay. So, like, I ask you this question because, like, it's only like these 6-7 months after this lockdown and stuff, we are hearing a lot of the psychologies, this stuff's booming in online. And then we were all talking, like our teammates, the cricket team, we were all talking, and then we have actually not taken any psychology session before. Like, I have taken it, but like for my personal stuff, but not especially for sports. So we were talking, and then we actually like didn't know like when should we go, like do we really need to go and see a sports psychologist, because people kept telling that going to a sports psychologist actually enhance your performance and help you focus your goal much better. So we're just speaking, and then we're actually bit a blank, like when should we go, like what should we do and stuff. That's why I wanted to ask you about it.
Right. No, actually, what happens is, you don't necessarily have to go and see a sports psychologist only when you are, when you're at crossroads or when you think, okay,
Okay.
maybe this is a challenge which, we have been facing a lot of times. In fact, a lot of sports psychology work primarily is, preventive
Mm-hmm.
and less curative. So, by
Mm-hmm.
that I mean that you don't necessarily always have to have a problem
Okay.
facing, existing, which you would come and say we could discuss our way through it. A lot of our work, a lot of these mental training skills, like I said, they're teachable.
Okay.
Right, so I think in that sense it's really preventive. So you don't necessarily have to see a sports psychologist or your team just because you're facing like a slump, or you're
Okay.
facing certain performance issues, or you're facing, say, team problems and things like that. you
Okay, I
can you
get
can
it.
still be a very well
Mm-hmm.
functioning team and a very well performing team, and you can still see a sports psychologist to ensure that this
Mm-hmm.
performance continues or enhances and
Okay,
things like
I
that.
get it. I get it. So, like, one personal question I want to ask you is, do you recommend meditation to athletes? Because I have seen a lot of coaches telling it, but then we can't actually focus on that and do it.
I think what has happened is a lot of people find this whole meditation very, very cliche, because the way it is being seen
Yeah.
in the media and the way people just talk about it, that you have to sit down and close your eyes and do this and do that. But there are many, many ways of doing meditations, and yes,
Okay.
it is a potent technique which a lot of practitioners use with athletes. But again, you have to understand whether the athlete is comfortable doing it, whether the athlete really knows what meditation is. So you have to ensure that you educate that athlete
Okay.
as to this is what it means and this is how it goes about, and these are the benefits, and this is how you will be doing it, this is how we'll be practicing it, and things like that. So I think
Okay.
if you don't really know how to do it, and if that is something which is sort of stopping you from I don't want to do this because this seems very cliche, ye karne se kya hoga, a lot of athletes come up
Yep.
with these things. See, this seems boring and I don't want to do it. That is probably because your athlete may not know what
Mm-hmm.
exactly it is, or how exactly do you do it,
Okay. So I
right?
guess
So
people need to
definitely,
first
yeah,
educate them, then do it.
yeah. And we don't expect, as psychology practitioners, we don't expect anybody to know everything that we
Okay.
will talk about, right? So there
Okay.
are, of course, like we are here to sort of walk you through the whole process, and we're here to hold your hand through it, and then ensure that you become independent in this process. I mean,
Okay.
your mental fitness shouldn't be dependent on whether you have a sports psychologist traveling with you all the time or no. Ultimately, you're an athlete. You are going to have to go step on the field, and you're just going to be
Yeah.
there on your own. So you have to ensure that you're independent in and you're confident in your own skill.
Okay. So like we're almost at the end of this session. Like we have some 4-5 audience question to ask you. So like there is a guy
Yes.
called Vishal who wanna ask you like, what can I do if I always feel pressure in the death overs? I'm a bowler, and can I overcome this if I actually take a help of a sports psychologist?
I would say definitely
Okay.
this is something which is workoutable, if I can. This is something that definitely can be figured out.
Okay.
And again, to pressure is something, it's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'll tell you, if the athlete in me talks, I would say that I completely relate to you, Vishal. And definitely when you play sport, pressure is just going to be there. So we have to, sort of work our way through pressure, and we have to learn how do we manage pressure, how do we handle pressure, and how does that pressure not have a
Mm-hmm.
negative effect on
Okay.
my performance or on my sport. So definitely this is something which can be worked out. If you consult a sports psychologist, I'm pretty sure he or she will be able to help you through it.
Okay. So the next question I want to ask you is there seriously something called as a home field advantage?
Again, this is also something that it depends a lot on perception. It depends a
Okay.
lot on how you perceive a lot of things. And yes, there has been a lot of research, but the research has been done in terms of Western countries and UK and Europe. So
Okay.
we can't just generalize the findings for our country. So in our country, there's a lot of dearth of research, if I may say so, in terms of sports psychology and athlete factors and things like that.
Okay.
But yes, if you look it up, you will definitely find arguments pro for it and con for it as to whether there really is something like a home
Yeah.
advantage. So,
So like there is a parent who wanna ask you
I
like,
mean,
should I?
what do as an athlete do you think?
Huh? I think it
As
is,
an
but
athlete, are
then
you comfortable playing on your own ground and then
yeah,
going away and playing like an away game?
like when I used to start playing, it was difficult in both the ways, even in my home field as well as outside. But then like eventually when I
Right.
got used to a lot of tournaments, I guess it became pretty fine. I don't see like there is
Yeah.
a major advantage though.
Yeah.
So like there is a
Like
parent.
I said, it's
Yeah, yeah,
individual
yeah, yeah,
perception.
yeah. That's true. That's true. So there's an uncle who want to ask you like, should I take up my son to a regular sports psychology session from now itself? He's 7-year-old district tennis player.
Okay, I think it's a very very good time to take your son to a sports psychologist, even though he's very very young. I think you said 7 years
Yeah.
old. I think the early you start doing mental training sessions, and like I said earlier, sports psychology work is preventive in nature. So your son is just going to learn all these mental training skills and sports. There are sports psychologists who work with younger kids. Like I
Okay.
myself work with a lot of younger kids, and my youngest athlete is I think 8 years old.
Okay.
So we do a lot of work with the athlete on a regular basis, just as you would work with an athlete who is say matured or like 20 plus and things like that. So
Okay.
definitely you can approach and you should approach a sports psychologist. That is only going to help you plan a lot of things better. Your son is going to enjoy playing sport, which is really, really important at a young age. He needs to be able to have fun when he's on court.
That's true.
And yeah,
Okay. So the last question is like, where can one pursue sports psychology in India? Can you recommend some good colleges?
unfortunately, we do not have formal courses in our country.
Okay.
I'm talking from a master's level education. The basic need is for you to be able to have like a BSc, either like a sports science BSc or like a BA in psychology. A lot of universities have a BSc in psychology. I'm,
Yep.
I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But like a psychology undergrad or a sports science undergrad is recommended. And then as of now, I think the option for a master's course is whether you go to UK or you go to Australia and you pursue like an MSc or an MA in sports psychology.
Okay.
And then you can decide, whether you want to take up like a PhD or you want to do like a doctor of psychology. If you want to become like a practitioner and like an applied practitioner. So
Okay.
it takes up a lot of years. It takes up, I think, almost about more than 8 years
Okay.
to become like an applied sports psychologist.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty huge.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's because you deal with performance issues, and you deal. Though you may say that working in sport is really really glamorous and it's fun. Yes, it is.
Yep.
It is extreme. It's a really nice industry to be a part of, and it's a very challenging job. So you can't mess around. I mean, I'll be very honest here. You can't. It's not advisable to do just basic certifications and call yourself a psychologist, because then you're not an ethical
Yep.
practitioner. And as somebody who's been a part of this field for so long now, I'm also doing my own doctoral. I only can stress so much on the ethical practice, because you're working with humans, and
Yeah,
you
makes
have to
sense.
ensure that you stick to the guidelines.
So, like, we're almost at the end of the session. Like, the one question that I want to ask you at the last is your top three, like, tips or advice to athletes who are listening to this as a sports psychologist.
My top three tips, or I would say, I don't know what you call it, but like pearls of wisdom. I don't know
Okay.
if it's too much, but the first and foremost is have fun when you play.
Okay.
Sport is, you should be able to have fun in your performance. You should be able to enjoy what you play, and that is going to help you play your sport better. It's going to help you perform better, and it's going to help you play for much longer time. So
Okay.
please ensure that you're enjoying the sport, because primarily that is why a lot of people start playing sport, right?
Yep,
Because you
that's true.
find it enjoyable, you find it fun. So don't lose that fun. Another point that I would really like to stress on is, yes, in today's society, results are really, really important, and everybody is out there ready to weigh you and measure you against your performance. But your results do not define you. You lose a match, that does not make you a loser. So please don't just put all your eggs in one basket, and the basket called result. There
Okay.
will be good days, there will be bad days, and I think that is something which sport really teaches us a lot. I mean, having been an athlete, it really has given me that perspective. It has sort of molded me in a way that there will be good days and there will be bad days. So we just have to ensure that even after a loss, or even after you lose a match, you still have the time to come back to your training ground
Okay.
and practice and just get better. I think that's one. And I think the third part, which I feel is really, really important, is discipline. If you are a disciplined athlete, I think it is going to take you to places where, for some people, you might feel that this is unimaginable, but discipline is one quality which we should all just hold on to, because it is sort of like a navigator. It is like an anchor which sort of helps us
Yep.
through our goods and bads. I think this, just being disciplined, respecting your sport, respecting your opponents, respecting your own effort, your coach's effort, and just being a good uh, an athlete who is disciplined is going to definitely help you play better. It's definitely going to change your approach and perspective towards your sport, towards your performance, towards your results. So I think that is something is worthwhile thinking about. I mean,
Okay.
spend some time when you listen to this. It may sound a little philosophical and sound a little cliche in the beginning, but believe me, spend some time with it. And if you are up for it, you can always have a conversation with me. I'm more
Okay.
than open and more than happy to have a chat, because I just enjoy doing it.
That's great. I'll just link your profile below so that anybody can actually
Oh,
contact if they
definitely.
want it. Yeah.
Yes.
So, like, I want to say, like, a huge thanks for actually coming up in the Sports Glory podcast, and it was nice talking to you and getting connected with you.
I think you're doing a great effort, Aishwarya, and
Oh,
we need
thanks a
more
lot.
people like you to sort of, have practitioners and have field experts talk about their field, because as of now, India is in a narrative change where we are a multi-sporting
Yeah.
nation, and our athletes are really, really working very, very hard to make a mark at the international podiums. And I think, the way the journey is just upwards and onwards. So thank you so much for making your bit in this journey, and
Oh,
all the
thanks a lot for
best
that.
for you in your degree and all your endeavors. And I wish this podcast, the entire Sports Glory podcast, just does fantastic.
Oh, thanks a lot for that. Thanks a lot for that. So thanks a lot guys for listening to this podcast till here. I hope it was useful and it was fun. If you want to get in touch with her personally, I'll be putting up her profile link in the description so that you can just go and talk to her personally or directly. So until next week, until a brand episode of the Sports Glory podcast, signing off, Limelight Aish.